Welcome to this bonus session right now, an accompaniment to the Complete Guide to Design. In this session, we're going to be talking about how we can get great looking website designs into X-Site Pro, designed from scratch. And we're going to be covering off the following. We'll be looking at sources of inspiration. Where can we get some good ideas for what our website design, our outer page layout design should look like? And then where can we actually store that information as we come across those great sites in the swipe file recap? We'll be talking about how we redesign templates. Obviously, we cannot simply go out there and rip off other people's designs. That's tantamount to copyright theft, never mind the lack of ethics. So we're not recommending that you go out and do that. We're talking about using other site designs as inspiration, as a starting point for your own design. The good news, though, is that it's very easy to take that inspiration and convert it into something that is unique and that is your own. Along the way, we'll be looking at splicing. That is how we actually cut up templates so that they can then be imported into X-Site Pro and reassembled. So let's get started straight away, beginning with, of course, sources of inspiration. Now, there are lots of places that you can go for ideas on what makes a good website design. The most obvious of which is simply by getting out there and searching the web. And you'll do this instinctively day to day anyway, in all likelihood. But the idea is that you do it in a slightly more structured way. So have your eyes open for what is good design, particularly within your niche, because obviously the successful sites in your niche are about as good an example of what you should be aiming to achieve as you'll find. So if, for example, we were in the lawn care or lawn mowers marketplace, let's try lawn mowers, we could simply do a search and then pop open a few of the sites that are returned in the top of the search results and check out those sites and look at the design and see if we can gauge anything from them. So we could look at, does it work? Is there a clearly defined layout? Is there nice clean navigation? Does it look aesthetically pleasing? Does it tie into the right sorts of themes that we would expect in terms of colours and prominence of features and so on? This one perhaps of the three is the better in that it's nice and cleanly laid out, lots of nice white space, very clear navigation, delivers against my expectations in terms of the imagery, having searched for lawn mowers. And of course, it's a branded site, as we can see here, so no surprise that they're doing a great job of it. So that's at a very simple level, just doing some simple Google searches. There are also some great signposts on sites like Smashing Magazine. I talked about this site in the design course itself. If you head over to smashingmagazine.com and click the inspiration tab over on the right hand side, the topic link, you'll see a list of all sorts of different showcases, including lots of website showcases, a couple of which I have already open here. Here's one that's a list of memorable websites, and if I scroll down, you'll see there are screenshots of all these sites. And these screenshots themselves are great inspiration if you're thinking about ideas for how you could lay out your website and make it look great. Even though these are slightly more designed, you will come across some that are just brilliant. They're absolutely fantastic and ones that you could take a lead from. How about this one, for example? Lovely light beige background, lots of white space. It's an inspirational design, not much text, but great use of colors and a nice design on the right hand side, and could be a really good starting point for a design of your own. Here's another showcase. This time again, lots of graphic heavy designs once more. But scrolling down, you'll see there are some sites that are not so heavy on the graphics that could be easily replicated. Let's just see if we've got anything. That's a nice clean one there, the blue one. This one would be certainly very easy to redesign in X-Site Pro and looks great. Likewise, this blue one, nice and clean design. So the idea there is that there are plenty of sources, jump-off points to showcase galleries like this that could give you some great inspiration. Another great source for designs is, of course, those sites who themselves design templates. This is Woo Themes, a company who make templates for WordPress sites. And if I scroll through some of the designs, you can see some nice, clean, crisp designs. Again, they're sources of inspiration. And once again, this and the site I'm about to show you next, these are commercial sites that sell templates. So you do have to be extremely careful to ensure that you do not simply rip off their designs. These works are the intellectual property of these sites. So your designs can really only be inspired by, they can be only derivatives of, they cannot be an exact replica of. That's the important distinction. You cannot simply copy this design pixel for pixel onto your site. Another template site, and there are lots of these template sites about. This is one of the biggest ones. Template Monster has thousands of templates, and as you can see on the right hand side, you can actually browse by category. So you can scroll down and select, as I have done here, for example, music as a category, and you'll find site designs that you like the look of. Here's one in the top right hand corner that looks pretty clean and crisp, really sets off the content well. You can see that the background itself is not overly designed, and yet the content within it sits there really well. It's really an impressive site. And if I wanted to, I could click through and look at that site in more detail, even go to the a live demonstration of the site. Here we have the inner page of that same site design. And it's something that, I could look at and think, well, that's a really nice, clean, crisp design, and it might be something that I take as inspiration. Now, having looked at some examples of where we can go for inspiration, it's worth noting, by way of a recap, that you need to be recording the good examples of design that you come across. The reason being that from time to time you will want to design different elements, sites, buttons, forms, name grabs, things like that. And anything that you come to designing, it pays to have a repository, a list of good examples of design that you've come across in your travels online. We mentioned swipe files. We talked about a tool called Evernote, which is a great way of storing all of that information that you come across, those examples of good design. And we do really recommend that you follow through with that, because when it comes to designing your own site, particularly within your particular niche, you're going to have a great list of, hopefully a list of designs that are really relevant to your particular industry that you're in, that you can use as inspiration when it comes to designing your own site. And the more sites that you have in your swipe file, the better, because you're going to be drawing on multiple sources of inspiration then. And so by definition, your site being a composite of all sorts of inputs in terms of inspiration, it's not going to closely resemble any of those sites. So it's better ideally than having just one site as your inspiration, else you're going to have a much higher chance of ending up looking just like it. So let's talk about redesigning the template. If we found a template, let's take this one just here. If we wanted to actually take this design and restyle it, make it our own, but use it as our starting point, use it as our inspiration, how do we go about doing it? How do we redesign the site? Well, the first thing we need to do is to take this design into a graphics package, because obviously we can't do any editing or manipulation within a browser. So all I'm going to do is hit the print screen button on my keyboard and drop into a graphics application. In this case, I'm using Photoshop, but of course you could use any application you want. Now I'm just going to get rid of the excess screen grab just there. Let's crop that and expand that window so we can see the design in our design app here. Okay, so here's the design. This is our starting point, okay? Now, what I'm going to be doing is actually myself going through the process of disassembling this design, taking it back to some basic design layout, and then splicing it so that we can actually bring it into Excite Pro. So the first thing I'm going to do, and we are going to keep it fairly simple for the purpose of this demonstration, is I'm just going to take out some of these elements, the elements that are, of course, particular to this actual website. So I'm going to copy this image, first of all, duplicate. So I've got a backup copy in my design application here that I can refer back to later on for just to sort of refresh my my memory. Now, before I start hacking this design about a little bit and customizing it, I just want to recap an important point using an illustration that comes out of Excite Pro. You may recognize it. Now, this shows you the anatomy of an Excite Pro website. The reason I'm showing you this right now is before I start taking away bits of the other design that we were looking at a second ago, our inspiration, I want you to understand where the different component parts of the Excite Pro website sit in the context of the design we were looking at a moment ago, that website. So you've got a header panel, you've got an info bar below that, you've got the main panel in the middle, left and right panels either side, and a page footer at the bottom, all surrounded by a page margin. And if we wanted to map this design, this illustration, onto the website inspiration that we were looking at a moment ago, we can do that very quickly. I'm going to use a red block here. Let me just take that back a bit, just to help me sort of highlight areas of the page quickly. Now, the area that I've highlighted at the top there is quite clearly going to be the header section that we were looking at a second ago. If I move this down, you can see there's the header panel. Now, conversely, if I just drag that right to the bottom, you've guessed it, that's going to be the footer panel, and I can sort of see that if I move my window over to the right hand side. You can see there's the page footer. Clearly that's the section of the page here. If I wanted to take a look at the info bar, quite clearly, if I just paste this onto the window here, is going to be that red strip at the top there. Let me just get rid of that one. You can see that sort of horizontal strip is what we could call our info bar in the context of Excite Pro. It sits below the header graphic quite clearly. What about the left and right panels? Well, the left and right panels are going to be somewhere over here. Let's just get rid of some of the excess of this little red block. So what you can see highlighted there would constitute the left panel, and conversely, what you see on the right hand side would be a right panel were there one. Of course, there isn't one on this design, so we can get rid of that. So what I've tried to do there is just indicate to you where, in regards to the design we were looking at, our inspiration, where these panels sit. The reason I explain that is because in due course, this design is going to be broken down so that it can be reassembled using this skeleton, this framework. The other thing that we couldn't see is the page margin. Now, the page margin is the area that surrounds the actual design, and we don't have much in the way of margin around the design. You can see there's a sort of a grey background, but that's not actually the site design. That's actually the background in my graphics application. It's better if we hop over to the actual website. If I expand this browser window, watch what happens to the margins left and right of the page, and also left and right of the header and footer sections. Can you see that they've grown? The space here to the right has expanded, likewise to the left. The content in the middle, importantly, has stayed pretty much the same. It's stayed pretty constant, fixed width. Okay, so the important point to note there is that the margin left and right is what takes up the slack if the page gets wider. What about if the page gets longer though? Is it the footer that grows? Is it the header that grows? No, it's the main panel that grows, because that's where the content is that ultimately determines how high the page is going to be, how long the page is going to be. So if I click on this reviews page now, just to look at another page of content slightly longer, you can see that it's the main panel that's grown. The left and upper sections have stayed constant. The footer's still pretty much the same. It's this main panel that's stretched downwards. So that's important, because we understand now, if we just drop back to our design here, we understand that the page is going to grow either side of our main panel content, and it's going to grow at the bottom of the main panel. Those are the areas that grow. It's worth pointing out, because some designs that you look at, you need to know that when you're figuring out which bits of the design have to tile, have to grow, have to be a constant color. Because, for example, if you look at a gradient color fill or a graphic, that graphic can't stretch. So whatever areas of the page are going to grow, they have to be able to tile. In the case of the margins, they have to be able to tile horizontally, left to right. In the case of this area here, it has to be able to tile vertically. So in this example, I'll be using a flat color that this particular design will be able to stretch in order to allow the page main panel content to grow. All right, so what we're going to do then at this point, having understood the anatomy of the design and what bit goes where, we're going to start hacking it about a bit just to make it our own. And to start with, what I'll do is I'm going to take away the detail in this upper portion of the design. Okay, so I can do that just by selecting that portion and hitting delete. I could also, if I wanted to, vary the color of this panel, this header panel. At the moment, it's very much, the same as the original, our inspiration, the design that we looked at. But I could select a different color if I wanted to. How about a nice dark blue, for example? And I could colorize that panel just by using the fill tool. And there we have a nice blue color, which I could also copy and paste by selecting Control and then C and then Control V. And I can paste that now at the bottom of the page in lieu of the footer area. Okay, so we've got a header and a footer. Importantly, notice they're different. They're different to the originals. These are now blue. They're my own works. They're blue rectangles, one at the top and one at the bottom of the page. I'm also now going to change the main panel. If I just flatten this image off again. And I'm going to change the main panel by giving it a gradient fill. Okay, and I can do that by firstly selecting the top color, the start of the gradient fill. Then I can select the end color of the gradient fill. And I can choose my gradient fill tool and go ahead and fill that space. There we go. So you can see that now I've greatly simplified the design. I've stripped out all that was unique to that particular design, applied my own gradient fill, which is slightly different to theirs, so it's a unique fill. I've given my header a different color and the footer a different color. So for all intents and purposes, there is nothing, save perhaps for the proportions of the design, which really we're talking semantics here. There's nothing really that would immediately identify this design as the same as this one. I'm sure you'll agree, they're markedly different at this stage. And everything that we now add back to the design is going to take it even further away still from the original. Okay, so what else could we do to sort of customize this? We could do some simple effects if we wanted to. For example, I could insert a glow in the main head section if I wanted to. I could do that, for example, just to show you the effect. I could copy and paste that part of the image there, just get rid of the excess below the header. I'm inverting the color of that just by doing Control I, just so I can see it. I can colorize that to make it a sort of a blue color. Let's start with this header color that we were using. And so I could, let's say, do that color there. I could then give it a Gaussian blur to say, I don't know, 20, maybe even 40, something like that if I wanted to, and just tidy up the raggedy edges. Okay, so you can see all I've done there is a simple effect, and let's just drop that down a bit. A simple glow effect by putting a shape there and giving it a color and making it blurred. Okay, so you can see that it almost looks like a highlight going on. I could do that if I wanted to in the header panel. I'm actually going to get rid of that. I don't want to feature that just now, but it's an option. What else could we do? We could, of course, change the background to be a non-gradient, or significantly adjust that so maybe it has a stronger shadow effect at the top. We can tinker with this to make it our own as much as we want, but I'm happy with it as it is right now. Okay, so now having taken the design back, we started redesigning the template. I'm going to start splicing, and the reason I'm going to go straight into sort of splicing is because I want to explain a few points as we go. And although were I doing a design like this, I would actually come up with a complete design and then I would start splicing it into Excite Pro. I'm going to show you how you can sort of do it bit by bit. So I'm going to go back and forth because I think it illustrates the point a little bit easier rather than you trying to absorb the whole lot in one go and then me splicing it all into Excite Pro in one go too. So the first thing I need to point out is that this portion, this design we're looking at right now, is going to be my page margin. This is going to sit behind my website, the main panel of my website. The main panel of my website I'm proposing sit within the central section here at about 950 pixels in width. And then the page margins around the site will stretch left and right. They'll grow or shrink as required. Why? Because we're going to have a tiling image. And at the bottom of the page will be my page footer, and that will span the whole width of the website browser, the browser window. No matter how wide the window gets, that page footer will span the full width of the window. Okay, so the bit of this design that I need in order to be able to have my page margins tile effectively is this part here, okay? Just a sliver. Why just a sliver? Because it's going to tile that image horizontally. And as you can see, it's the same. From left to right, it's the same. So I only need a sliver, a vertical sliver. So if I just copy that by selecting Control-C, and then I pressed Control-N to do a new window, and Control-V to drop that little piece that I just copied into it, I can now save this for the web, and I can do that just so that you know by going to File, Save for Web in my design application. I'm going to save this off as a JPEG, and we'll call it background, something nice and easy to remember. And I'm going to drop into Excite Pro. Okay, so we're going to create a new website, and it's going to be a blank website. We'll call this one Designing Templates. Okay, and click OK. And that's going to add that website for us to our demo site folder and then load the website automatically. And if I head over to the page layout tab, you'll see, of course, at this moment in time it's blank. That's because we haven't done any design work yet. So the first thing I'm going to do, I mentioned the design that we were just looking at is going to form our page margin, is that I'm going to select that image that I'd like to use as my background, okay? I'm going to select from hard drive and then call up that background image that we just saw a moment ago and choose that. Now I'm just going to make this window a bit wider so that you can actually see what's happening here. Let me just make it a bit larger. Okay, you can see that the image has been applied. There's the blue header strip and there's the main panel. You can actually see that image then starting to repeat. There it is again underneath, and if I scroll down, it'll probably be repeated again. Yes, it is. Now, that's because we need to go to the Settings option, Advanced Image Tiling, and in the page margins, we just want tile horizontally with scroll. That's what we want to set it as. Now, it doesn't update automatically. We just hop over to the Web Pages tab and back, and you'll see there it is gone. Okay, now notice that when that image ends, that tiling image that's tiling left to right, when it finishes, can you see that the background currently is white? So below that image, behind that image is a white background. What we want to do is have that background be the same color as the very edge, the lower edge of this graphic, this tiling graphic. And to do that, all we need to do is to hop back to our design application here, and using the color picker tool, just pick the very lowest edge that we can see, and then open the palette for the color that we've just selected and select the hex ref for that particular color. We can then drop into Excite Pro and specify that particular color, and sure enough, now it bleeds seamlessly off the bottom of our image, and it will continue to run down the page. So that's how you can just use a small graphic and have it blend into the background perfectly. I know that I'm going to need to use that same color as a background to my main panel as well, and indeed my left panel. So I may as well go ahead and set those up right now, just by pasting that number in while I have it in my on my clipboard. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, and let's just hop away and back just to refresh the design here. Now I haven't done my right panel. Why? Because you may have noticed that there is no right panel in our inspiration design. So I'm going to drop that down to 0 pixels width and padding, and you'll see it's been removed. Okay, we're starting to get there now. All I need to do next is to actually make this page a better width, closer width to our original source of inspiration. And just to sort of get an idea for the proportions, we could, if we wanted to, go back to our original copy there and grab the page width and see how wide that is. And you can do that simply by selecting on the image roughly, Control-C, Control-N, and you'll see roughly it's sort of 960. Well, I'm actually going to go with 950 pixels because that means that on a 1024 by 768 monitor resolution, you'll see a bit of the page margins left and right, and the 950 pixel width main section of the page is going to sit there nicely framed. So here's another example of how we're taking our design slightly away from our source of inspiration, which is a good thing. So if you've used Excite Pro before, you'll know that we have to make sure that the overall width of our main section here is the left panel plus the main panel, in this case, is going to equal 950. So if I make my left panel, let's say 200, by inference, the main panel wants to be 750. You guessed it. And I might want to increase the padding slightly as well for that panel. Okay, now I can't quite see as much of the design, so I'm just going to make my window a little bit larger here so we can still see our page margins left and right. Obviously, I made the overall page wider, so it's more difficult for us to see these margins now. Okay, so that done, I'm going to move on now to two other parts of the design. The first of which is the header area. Okay, remember which was the header area? Let's just remind ourselves briefly. Back in the design application, where are we? Let's just minimize some of these a second so we can find it. It'll be this one, I believe. Yeah, there we go. So the header is this section here, all right? And I can adjust that by specifying an exact height if I want to. Let's make it 120 for now. And let's just make it red in color just so that you can see it nice and clearly. All right, so you can see there's the header. Now, important point. I could, if I wanted to, at this stage, use a graphic. I could have a graphic appear here. And so long as it blended perfectly on the left and right edges of my background here, the page margin, this blue box at the top, this rectangle, so long as it blended well, it would appear a seamless design feature, framed left and right by our margins, which would look great. So if I'd had that glow effect in the center here, that would look just fine if I grabbed a piece of image, saved it off as a header graphic, and then brought it into Excite Pro. But because we deliberately didn't do that, we chose not to do that, we've left the design a flat color across the top here, I can effectively just choose that background color, that header color, and have that instead of this red, and it will basically blend perfectly in. Okay, so how do we select the color? Let's do what we just did a moment ago. Click with our eyedropper tool on the actual color we want to select. Then from the palette, click on it and grab the hex ref code. This is a unique code for that particular color. And if I just drop that code in, you'll see there we are. It's blended perfectly. So what about the strip immediately below the header? Can you remember what that was called? That's right, it was called the info bar. And the info bar is potentially where we could feature our navigation menu. Can you see as I look at the original source of our inspiration here, we have a menu. Well, I'm going to have my menu appear in the info bar, and can you see that the info bar is pretty much the same color as the header above it. So I'm going to go with that. So back into Excite Pro, I can grab my color just there, go to the info bar and add one. I can say, I don't know, 40 pixels or so for now. We can change that in a minute. And you can see that it's pretty much the right size. There we go. So you can see that's now the exact right height, header and info bar combined, to match up with our page layout. So let's just take a second and preview this page and see how it's coming along right now. Okay, so you can see there's the page design coming together. You can see the gradient effect tapering away to nothing. And we can see our main panel design here, which is a sort of a light grey colour. And we can see that our header and info bar together are fitting perfectly alongside our page margins. Okay, so nothing overly exciting, but it's starting to come together. Now the next thing I want to do is to tackle the background for the left panel and for the main panel. Because if we look at our design, in our design application, we'll see that the design actually runs all the way across the page. And if we refer back to our original source, we can see that it does here as well. There are pieces of content that sit and float above it, but we'll achieve that using simple tables within the actual web pages. So we want our actual design to float across the page here, and we can do that in one of two ways. We could either apply an image as a tiled background, much as we did before, and in that case we'd probably select a piece of the image like this, because that's the piece of image that would be tiled across the left panel and tiled across the main panel. But there's a shortcut to it, and I'm going to share that with you now. Rather than having this flat color, this sort of gray color as the background to my main panel and a gray color to the left panel, I'm actually going to change that to transparent. And look, bang, there we go. Now, because the color is transparent, it's see-through, you can actually see the background, the page margin showing through, the tiled image is showing through. So whatever we put in our left panel now will float over an invisible layer, an invisible background color, and will float over our page margin, our background. How cool is that? So we can repeat the process with the main panel. And there we have it. Our main panel is now transparent also. So if we insert a table here now, it's going to float beautifully over our background. Simple as that. So let's just save the site so we don't lose our place right now. Okay, so what's next? I think the next thing for us really is to tackle our info bar menu. And to have our info bar menu, if you look at the original site that we were looking at, we've got only 5 or so options. Well, we'll insert a few menu options on our own design just to show how that could come together. And before I do that, of course, I need to add a few pages, and I'm going to use the multi-page creation wizard just by right-clicking in the web pages section there, just to quickly add some pages in. So we could have home, about, contact, support, and say pricing, just as an example, and we can show those on our info bar. Click next, and then next, and create, and those 5 pages are created. I don't know of any web page creation tool or any website design tool that can create pages as quickly as that. It's really cool. And if I drop back to the page layout now and then call up my info bar and check the include links on info bar option, you won't be able to see them because the font is black against that dark background, but if I highlight them there, you can see the links have appeared. Now, those are just text links. I'm not happy with that. So if I click the menu settings option here, I can go ahead and choose a menu design that I feel is appropriate for this particular style right now. So I can scroll through all of the different options until I see something that jumps out at me. And I think, yeah, that's gonna work really well for this particular design. So maybe that glossy one would have worked. I'm gonna go for something simpler. Let's see, what have we got? Not that one. Let's try. There we go. That's quite a nice simple one. And as you mouse over it, you can see it changes color. So I'm going to select that. Click next. We could obviously customize the styling. I could choose different colored background tabs and so on. But I'm pretty happy. The only thing I'm going to do, I think, is perhaps make the font a little bit larger. Click next and finish. Okay. And that's going to insert the menu there in the page. Now, a couple of things. You can see there's a bit of a padding going on around that menu. I'm going to reduce the padding on the info bar to 0. And we can adjust that by playing with the height of the header and info bar panels respectively. If I just show you, if I change that back to red for a second, you can see that that's actually needs to grow a little bit to push the info bar down. Let's just expand that, say, to 125, maybe a bit more, 128. That looks about right. So we just added 8 pixels onto the header there. So I'm going to take 8 pixels off the height of the info bar, which is just perfect. You can see it's now flush, and I'll just flip that back to the correct color, and there we have our menu sat nicely. It's kind of nice actually because the mouse over effect actually almost matches the top part of our gradient fill, which is kind of cool. So that's that menu added. What about our left panel? What about adding some menu options into there too? I've already got the options selected to include links, so let's go and add some more web pages quickly using the multi-page creation wizard once more. And we'll just sort of simulate adding some category pages. So it could be, I don't know, gadgets, software, hardware, music, film, downloads. You get the point. Just these are sort of fictional category headings just to give us some page content to work with in our design. I'm going to show those on the left navigation menu. Just click next all the way through, create pages, done, 6 pages added, simple. So now if I head to the page layout, you can see, oh, there we have them. There are our pages listed, ready for us to work with. Okay, so now what I want to do is to turn this basic text link menu into a more attractive looking menu. And again, we use the menu settings option. I don't want it to look the same. I kind of liked the design effect of having a sort of grey menu here and a darker menu here. So I'm going to replicate that, something similar anyway. And if I just sort of work through the menu options and see what I can find, let's just keep going through until I find something I like. We'll go with something nice and sophisticated looking. Nothing there yet that I want to use. That's not bad. That glass one's quite slick. I wonder if there's a darker version of that menu background. Yeah, that looks cool. So let's go with that. It looks quite nice as you mouse over. You can see you've got a nice effect there. I'm going to click next and then finish to actually drop that menu in. So that's looking good. The only thing I'd say there is it's not, sort of not aligned right with the upper menu. Can you see I want the left edge of that top menu to line up with that one? So I probably need to strip out the padding, and there we have it. Of course, in doing that, I've butted them up together, which I don't want. I want a space between the two. So if I hop into the designer here and just before my navigation menu, just create a paragraph break or something like that, it'll just drop that menu down nice and simply. So we're getting there. We're getting there. Just going to save now to commit my changes. Okay, what I'm going to show you now, we don't actually need, I don't think, as wide a left panel. So I'm just going to shorten or narrow that a little. Left panel, at the moment it's 200. Let's just take 50 pixels off. In fact, let's take another say 10 pixels off. Let's make it 140. And so having taken 60 pixels off that, I'm going to add them back onto my main panel, say 810. Okay, just because that's going to get my content sitting a little bit more neatly than having a big space to the right of the left-hand panel. What could we do next to sort of move it forward? How about tackling our footer panel? Now, normally, to add a footer in Excite Pro, you would grab your color that you want your footer to be. In this case, we know it's the same as our header. Activate the page footer, specify a height, let's say 80 pixels, and give it a background color, as I've just done there. And if I scroll down, you can see there's the footer, which is easy enough to do. But if I preview that, let's just look at what's happened here and note something that's important. Can you see that although I have my page margins all nice and neat, the page footer only spans below the left panel and the main panel when I actually wanted it to span the full width? So what can I do to change that? Well, I'm going to give you the inside track today. I'm going to tell you how you can manually set Excite Pro to make this footer span the full width. And this isn't a documented feature. This is just a hack that I'm going to share with you. So if I go to the other tab, now I'm going to hop into the Global Scripts tab and then the head section of the Global Scripts tool. And in that section, I'm going to paste this code. Now, you can see the code on screen right now. I'll leave it there for a few seconds because you could always pause your video and do a screenshot. You don't really want to write it down by hand, but you can come back to this video and make a note of what this code is. So I'm just going to copy that code and paste it into the panel there. Now note it's calling an image which it's going to tile horizontally across the bottom. That's footer.jpg. I'll show you what that is in just a moment. As well as that, immediately after the opening body tag, I'm going to paste this little line of code again, which you can grab at your leisure, this being a video which you can pause. So there we are, that's it. All I now need to do is to give it that footer.jpg file. And the footer.jpg file is an 80 pixel tall, 2 pixel wide image that's got the same color as our footer. So if I just do Control N in my design application and give it just a small image, I've set it 80 pixels because that's how high I want my footer to be. That's how high I'm going to specify it be in Excite Pro. That's the only reason. So I click OK. There's my footer image. If I just simply save that now and call it footer.jpg, which is what's expected of that little bit of code that we inserted, drop back into Excite Pro and load the resource manager, click Add, add the footer.jpg file into my images folder, which is where it's being expected, and then drop back to my page layout, we should see that indeed there it is. The page footer is now spanning the full width of the page. So if I preview that one more time, that's an exclusive for you. You can see that no matter how wide I make this window or how narrow, that page footer sits there perfectly. And can you see how this page is really coming together now, and how rich the quality of this page is? You know, I'm going to have some lovely white panels of content here on the right hand side, and it's going to sit beautifully in this nice frame. Notice how understated the frame is as well. It's not over the top, it's not garish, it's not too much design. I could have had some design touches in a header graphic in the middle if I wanted to instead, but I've gone for something nice and clean and simple. And a lot of the best sites that you see out there, of course, are just that, nice and clean and simple. Okay, what else can we do? Well, we'll get stuck into the main panel now, I think, and just create a couple of table cells that are going to show you how you can lay out your content now simply in this main panel, very effectively, very simply. So if we drop back to Excite Pro and go to one of our web pages, let's go to the home page and make it our home page by checking the Make This My Home Page button. That's just so that it shows through in the page layout tab for us. Anything that you have selected as a home page appears in the preview. I'm going to insert, just for demonstration purposes, a 3-cell table. Of course, I could make it a lot more complicated if I wanted to, but I'm just going to keep it simple for this demo. I'm going to select Table Properties, and I'm going to specify the full 100% width. I'm going to also remove the cell spacing, and I'm going to remove the border. Okay, so it's a nice simple table. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of the spaces that are put in there by default. I'm going to specify that this middle cell of the 3 be 20 pixels high. Okay, so I'm setting that. And I'm also going to set my table padding to, let's say, 15 pixels for now, and see how that looks. All right, so we're getting there. I'm going to set this particular cell by right-clicking and selecting Cell Properties. I'm going to select this and make the background white, and I'm going to do the same with the lower cell. Okay, so effectively we've got 2 panels. I might want to reduce the height on this one. In fact, I'll just get rid of that and see. In fact, let's specify, say, 10 pixels just to make sure that we're not butting these cells together. And I'm going to preview, and you can see now we've got the first of our panels there, our white panels, floating over our background, and then there's a space which is transparent, and then the second of our panels. Now, we might want to change the spacing between those in just a moment, but what I'm actually going to do just now is grab some text and drop it in there just to fill out these panels a little bit, so it'll make it look a bit cleaner, make it look a bit closer to what it's going to look like in reality. So I'm just popping open a browser here, and I'm going to go to a useful site called Greek Text Generator. And this is a great place to just grab text that you can use for your design work. So if I select just 2 paragraphs and click the Generate Lorem Ipsum, we get 2 paragraphs of Greek text that we can just copy. I tend to just paste them into Notepad first, just to make sure we don't pick up any formatting along the way. And I can just paste that into my page here. Okay, so I might want to sort of break these paragraphs up a bit. Maybe paste that one in there, and I could obviously give it a title as well. So welcome to the world of Excite Pro template design. Being a title, I'll just capitalize these. Okay, and likewise I could have a subheading here. This is a slightly less important section. Okay. Sorry, just forgetting to capitalize again. Okay, we could obviously adjust the fonts and so on. I'll change these to, let's say, 15 for now. I'm also going to just show you how to increase the white space in your paragraphs. Something we talked about in the design course. If I go to paragraph properties, style, text, and then say specify 21 pixels, you can see it grows. That's perhaps a little bit too much. Let's drop it down to say 18. And we've got a bit more space in the paragraph. It's easier to read, and it looks a bit of a better design than leaving the text tight together. There are easier ways to do this using CSS if you're using CSS on your website design, but just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to do paragraph by paragraph just to show you how easy it is. It's coming together, so let's drop back to the page layout design, and now we can see the text having filled out. It's closed that gap to the 10 pixels I specified, so let's just return to that and increase that slightly to say 20. And back again to the main panel, page layout screen. So that's getting there now. It's coming together, and we've got this lovely design coming together with the nice, lots of white space. It's not too crowded. Let's reduce the main panel padding slightly, perhaps to say 20, just to sort of close it in a little bit to the left-hand edge there. We could, if we wanted to, drop this table, this first cell of the table down so that it lines up with the top of that menu if we wanted to. It depends what we're going to feature in this top above this menu, if anything. We could, for example, have opted for, let's see, I keep losing my windows. We could have opted for a search box like the one you see here. That might have been useful, but it really depends on whether you need a search for your site or not. It's very easy to insert a search box with X-Site Pro, as you probably know. So what else can we do? Let's just drop that down just to show you how you can manipulate that table. I can right-click on the table and select Properties, go to Style, Margin, and at the top I could add, say, 15 pixels margin. The margin above the table is going to then push down, and in fact I'm pretty much there, maybe a pixel out. Let's just change that to 14. Want it to align perfectly if we can. Remember, although you might not notice it subconsciously, you'll be able to tell that they were slightly out before. I think they're spot on now. So it's really starting to look like a professional site. We could obviously add some nice clean imagery now if we wanted to make this page come alive. It looks a little bit flat with just text, so a simple image that maybe picks up on the design theme of the site, maybe brings in some of the blue, maybe it's a lighter tonal shade of the blue, or maybe it picks up on a related color. Perhaps we could use cooler to come up with another style. Let's do that. That's not a bad idea. So I'm going to pick this color. Okay, so we've got the hex ref for this particular color now, the dark blue. I'm going to go to the cooler site that we've been to many times before in previous parts of the design course, of course. I'm going to go to the create link there, and in the base color, as we did in the design course, I'm just going to paste that code and press enter, and there we've got a selection of colors which are related to our base color, that dark blue. Now I can sort of scroll through these and pick different ones. See, these lighter blues look nice. I can keep clicking through. These are all complementary colors that relate to our primary color that we've selected. I think this light blue one looks kind of cool. So the colors that are being suggested are all great, and we can sort of bear them in mind when we're looking at imagery. Looking at the lighter blues, for example, or if I look at the monochromatic or analogous, I think it's pronounced. Maybe even darker green images. But we get some good ideas as to what might sort of sit well alongside our base color. One of the colors that I was going to pick up on the shades, this blue here, I'm actually going to copy that hex ref, drop into X-Site Pro, and use that hex ref for the fonts here, just to try it, just to see how it works. If I select my text there, go to the font color, select custom, and drop in the color that I just used there. Can you see that blue? I've actually specified that exact blue now for my headings. And as you can see, I think that works pretty well. It picks them out certainly very cleanly. And as we saw on Cooler, that base color alongside that secondary color looks great. I think it works well. We could have gone for a slightly different shade, perhaps this one, or even that green one might have looked quite good as well. Which one was that? The compound one? No. Analogous. Never know how to pronounce that. Let's try that green one just out of interest. Greeny blue, I should say. And see if that looks even better. I'm just going to select the colors as I did there a moment ago, go to custom, drop that hex ref in. Can you see how easy this is to use as a tool? And then apply that same color, drop back to page layout, and bang, there we go. Well, it's a bit more subtle, but looks good. I mean, we could choose either way. You get the gist. There are plenty of options of swapping the colors in to match the designs as suggested by Cooler. Okay, just to continue sort of developing this design a little bit, I'm going to do a few more things. I'm going to add a couple of links in the footer. And to add the links to the footer is dead easy. All I need to do is to click the designer tab. We already have an option to include links in the footer menu. I could, if I wanted to, just have a quick line break just to drop that down a little and then add some of these web pages. Let's try contact. Let's put that on the page footer, support on the page footer. How about pricing as well on the page footer? Of course, we could spend more time customizing those links, making them look different, but I'm going to leave those as they are. You get the point here that it's pretty easy to just go in and change those. If we look at our design inspiration, our original source of inspiration, you can see that their footer has links. It also has a copyright message. It has an option to change the language or currencies of the site as well. I suppose I could just do a little bit more in terms of adding a couple more pages. Let's try home and about as well on the page footer, and we could also change the spacing so that they're a little tighter together in the settings. Let's change that to say 10. So change that to white. I'm going to change the hover text to white as well, and the visited text to white so that it doesn't suddenly disappear after you've clicked on it. Let's click finish, and there we have the links in the page. If I went into the designer, I could let's just left align this a second. I could have a copyright message as well. So copyright turn on 2011, say. Click OK. Because I've got too much spacing going on there, I'd need to go in and edit those. So let's just drop back in and change the spacing on all that fun stuff. So 1 second. Paragraph properties. I'm just changing the margins between the properties, between the paragraphs. Sorry. Just to close up those gaps. Okay. And I need to add a little bit of spacing because the menu is automatically kicking that text across. So on this paragraph, I'll add, let's try 20 pixels. A little bit less perhaps, maybe 16. Okay, one more pixel perhaps. Okay. All right, so that's lined up nicely. We could maybe change the colors to take them back a little bit if we wanted to, but you can see how you can achieve a similar effect to that we're looking at just there. Okay, so having done some work on our footer, I'd just like to do some stuff in the header. Now you can see in the header there they've got additional links over and above the standard links there. They've got a link to a shopping cart. I'm not actually going to do anything over here on the right hand side because it's just a repeat of what I did there in the footer. It's pretty basic stuff. So what I will do is do a little logo, custom designed logo, just to show you that this kind of stuff's not difficult to do either. And then I'll drop that into the design for you too, just to round off the section. I've got my original sort of stripped back design here. What I'm going to do is create a new layer onto which I'm going to do some handwriting. Okay, so apologies in advance for my pretty poor handwriting. I do far too much computer work to have good quality handwriting. I've got a little design tablet. It's made by a company called Bamboo, and I can just go ahead and select a brush. Let's choose the brush tool and say give myself a 5-pixel brush and do some simple writing. Now, as a rule, if you're doing any sort of handwriting using a tablet or whatever, it's best to do it large, because then any sort of tiny little jitters or nicks, you can reduce the effect of those when you resize the layer down. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So if I write simply Excite Pro. Okay, not the best writing, I admit, but as I said, I do far too much computing to have good handwriting. What I can do now is reduce the size of that layer just by adjusting the scale, and in so doing that sort of does improve the resolution of it. I'm squishing it down slightly. I could also pick up on that stuff from Cooler if I wanted to, and pick a complementary color to that blue. Let's say this one here. I could perhaps grab part of that layer that I just wrote, cut it and paste it back, drop that code in for the color off Cooler, let's copy that, paste it into there. Oh, it's not letting me paste it for some reason. There we go. And then with that color selected in the foreground, I can press Control U to edit the hue and saturation. And I can basically, as you can see, I can colorize that Word Excite Pro so that it kind of complements my design nicely. And if you do a different color on the second word, you can generally butt it up a lot closer. You don't need the space between them. And having done that, I'll just merge those back together by pressing Control E. And perhaps I could just sort of do a quick drop shadow that just sort of bring those forward against that background slightly, give them a bit more depth. So I'll just sort of apply a drop shadow, and you kind of hardly see it, but it will actually lift the text slightly on the page. Don't want it that much, probably about that will be fine. Okay, now that being a logo, you may want to import that obviously into the design, into the header. Of course, you might want to take more time, you might want a nice logo, all of that fun stuff, but I'm just doing this to illustrate a point, how easy it is to do. Now I'm going to add a new layer just here, and then merge that with the layer, because then it's going to apply that shadow. I'm not going to lose that shadow when I paste this image into a transparent background. So I'm going to select all, Control C, Control N to create a new image that I want to be transparent, paste that image in, Control Alt Shift S, or Files Save for Web. I'm going to save this as a PNG file so you can see it's transparent. Save that as a logo in my folder there, and bring that into Excite Pro. And I can do that by going to the header panel, and you can see there's nothing in the header panel at the moment. It's the portion above the area there. So all I'm going to do is select the image icon to add an image from the clip art library, select from hard drive, select my logo, we'll call it logo, that's our alt text. And there it is, overlaid nicely. Now, I could just increase the vertical image spacing a little, just to sort of give us a bit of space between the top and the top of the actual page. Perhaps even a little more. Let's go for, say, 16 or so, and see how that looks in situ. It's getting there. Let's just perhaps add a little bit more space. Let's take it up to 22, say. Okay, and see how that looks. It's getting better, although we're starting to push the page info bar out of whack. So I reckon I need to take a couple of pixels off that right now. I could have done it with by inserting a table cell to position it more accurately. That's often easier. So we haven't done a great deal. We haven't spent ages, on the design. But what you can hopefully see from this demonstration is how you can get out there, find inspiration, and when you come across those inspiring websites, like the one we started out with here, how you can take the essence of it, completely disassemble it, as we did in our design application, rebuild it so that it's your own design using your own elements, but without having to overthink the creativity part. So if you're not a creative mind, you can take inspiration from something like this, and as we've done in a very short period of time, relatively speaking, especially given the fact I've been talking through most of it and explaining stuff, you can see that we've created a nice looking design, one that's going to grow effectively. If we resize the page, or if we have pages with more content on than others, they're going to all sit well together. We've got a great footer, that's a header and a footer framing our page content. We just need to add a little bit of imagery and perhaps a few, as I say, details, just to bring it alive a little bit, perhaps a bit underneath our left-hand navigation there. But in less than an hour, we've got to a point where we're, I'd say, 80% there with our global site design. We just need to add some details just to give it that professional look and feel, and then obviously start working on the important part, that is the main panel content, our web page content. So hopefully that splicing and importing into Excite Pro has given you the confidence, especially given that you can refer back to this bonus video in due course. It's a slightly advanced session, I accept, but hopefully it's going to help you make the transition from someone that's reliant upon the inbuilt templates towards somebody that, with a little bit of creative thinking, a little bit of exploration and research, will be able to come up with their own unique design that no one else has got. Nobody else is going to have your design that you've done yourself, and that you can continue to develop over time. Using these techniques effectively, and using Excite Pro, of course, you can come up with some wonderful site designs. We've seen some great examples of people having employed these kinds of tactics before, and hopefully you'll be able to join their ranks very soon. So thank you very much for watching this bonus session. If you haven't already done so, check out the other bonus session on creating great header graphics. And we hope you've enjoyed the course. Thanks for watching.